The house was quiet now, too quiet. Evelyn Ward sat in the same armchair where she had once waited for phone calls that never came. Her bank account was empty. The daughter she had once cradled in her arms was now preparing legal papers against her. And somewhere, far beyond her reach, the young man she thought she knew was gone, along with every dollar she had saved. There were no arguments left to make. No explanations strong enough to repair the distance between a mother and her only child. What remained was silence. A silence heavy enough to press into every corner of the room, every memory of what she had lost. This was not how she imagined her later years. Not the way she thought her husband's absence would shape her. She'd expected loneliness, yes, but not this kind of betrayal. And so the story begins not in joy, but in what lingers after joy is gone. The chair at the end of the table had been empty for nearly 10 years, but Evelyn Ward still set the table for two. Old habits die slowly, and grief, when carried long enough, becomes less about sharp pain and more about ritual. Every morning she brewed 2 cups of coffee, and every morning she poured one down the sink, whispering a quiet goodbye as she watched the steam fade. Her husband's passing had left the house still, but it was not the kind of silence one grows used to. It was the kind that pressed on her shoulders like a weight. She tried to fill it with television, but the voices felt artificial. She tried to drown it with errands, but the stores felt lonelier than home. Neighbors waved, but they had their own families, their own busy lives. Friends had slowly faded away, some gone to other towns, some gone to illness, others simply lost in the slow unraveling of age. Evelyn remained, tucked into her modest home on the edge of town, surrounded by framed photos that reminded her of what she once had and what she no longer did. Her daughter, Laura, visited when she could, often rushing between work and her own struggles. Evelyn never said it, but she looked forward to those visits more than anything. Still, she did not want to burden her only child. Laura had already endured her own heartbreak, a divorce that left her scrambling to piece her life back together. And so Evelyn kept her own silence, filling her days with walks past the park, cups of tea cooling on the counter, and letters she never sent. Loneliness is not always loud. It can live in the quiet rhythm of days that all look the same. But Evelyn knew one thing. The chair across from her would never be filled by the man who once sat there. And the question of who, if anyone, would sit there again lingered like an echo she could not escape. It was Laura who first noticed how her mother's world was shrinking. The routines, the quiet house, the evenings spent staring at the window as though waiting for someone who never arrived. Laura worried that her mother's silence was becoming something heavier, something that could not be lifted with an occasional visit or phone call. One day, she arrived carrying a box wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside was a modest laptop. Nothing fancy, just enough to browse the internet, write emails, maybe watch a movie or two. Laura placed it on the kitchen table and smiled. "Mom, I think it's time you had something new to keep you company. Something to connect you with the world again." At first, Evelyn resisted. The keyboard felt foreign under her fingers. The mouse moved too quickly, the screen too bright. But Laura sat beside her, patient and steady, showing her how to open a browser, how to type a message, how to search for the garden roses she once grew with her husband. By the end of the afternoon, Evelyn had laughed more than she had in weeks. And soon, the laptop became more than just a device. It was a doorway. Through it, Evelyn discovered online groups of widows who shared her grief, recipes that reminded her of Sunday dinners, photographs of gardens that bloomed brighter than any she could tend alone. She even reconnected with distant cousins whose names she had nearly forgotten. Laura was relieved. She believed the laptop was giving her mother a bridge back to life, a way to keep the silence from swallowing her whole. Evelyn, too, felt the stirrings of something she had not felt in years: curiosity. And with curiosity came a fragile kind of hope. She could not have known that the same device meant to save her from loneliness would one day lead her deeper into it. The message came on a quiet evening in early spring. Evelyn was scrolling through her new profile, looking at photographs of flower gardens and old church choirs, when a notification popped up. "Peter Smith has sent you a friend request." His picture showed a young man with kind eyes and a warm smile. The request surprised her. He was only 24 according to his profile, and she hesitated at first. But curiosity won, and she clicked accept. The first message was simple. "Hello, Evelyn. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I just wanted to say your smile and your photo is very kind." She read it twice before answering. It had been so long since someone, anyone, noticed her in that way. She replied politely, expecting nothing more. But soon another message arrived, and then another. Each was respectful, light, almost shy. Day by day, their conversations grew. Peter asked about her garden, her favorite books, her memories of the coast where she once vacationed with her husband. He told her about his studies, his dreams of travel, his longing to see the world. His attention felt genuine, his words carefully chosen. Evelyn felt something stir inside her that she thought had long gone dormant. She told herself it was harmless, just conversation, just kindness across a screen. But when she woke each morning, she found herself checking for his messages before even making coffee. Loneliness has many disguises. Sometimes it looks like longing, sometimes it looks like hope, and sometimes it looks like the glow of a laptop screen late into the night, reflecting the smile of a woman who had almost forgotten what it was to be noticed. Weeks passed, and Peter Smith became part of Evelyn's daily rhythm. He asked how she slept, reminded her to eat, and sometimes sent small poems he claimed to have written just for her. Evelyn began to believe she mattered again, not as someone's widow, not as someone's aging mother, but as a woman still deserving of care. Laura noticed the change. Her mother hummed while folding laundry. She lingered in front of the mirror, brushing her hair with a care she had not shown in years. "You seem happier, Mom," Laura remarked one evening, pouring tea. Evelyn only smiled, unwilling to share the secret that gave her this glow. Peter's words filled the hollow places of her days. He told her she was strong, that her heart was rare, that she deserved companionship after so many lonely years. He spoke of his admiration, his respect, and in time, something softer, his affection. For Evelyn, it was as though someone had lit a candle in a long, dark room. She leaned into the warmth, ignoring the shadows. Each message drew her further in until her heart ached when he did not write and soared when he did. She believed at last that perhaps love, unexpected, improbable, had found her again. But Evelyn's heart was not divided only between past and present. It was tethered to her daughter as well. She had long promised Laura that one day she would help her secure a place of her own, away from the shadow of her divorce. Evelyn wanted to see her daughter safe, steady, rebuilding her life. The promise was real, but so was the new need that tugged at her. Peter began to hint that distance was unbearable. He wanted to visit, to see her face not through a screen but across a table. Evelyn's heart leapt at the thought, but he confessed that he could not afford the ticket. He worked, he said, but money was tight. A plane ticket was just out of reach. Evelyn hesitated. She had savings, modest but meant for emergencies. She thought of Laura's apartment, of her promise, but then she thought of the empty chair, of the years that had bled together without joy. She asked herself what it would mean to finally share her home with laughter again. And so, in quiet secrecy, she transferred the money. She told herself it was an investment in companionship, in a future not written by loneliness. Laura would understand, she thought, when she saw how happy her mother was. But promises, once broken, rarely mend cleanly. Laura Ward had been patient with her mother. She had carried her own burdens quietly. Divorce papers, moving from one rented room to another, and the quiet humiliation of starting over in her late 30s. Through it all, she believed her mother's promise, that when the time was right, Evelyn would help her with the down payment for an apartment of her own. One Sunday afternoon, Laura sat across from her mother at the kitchen table. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she folded napkins. Laura reached across, taking one of her mother's hands. "Mom," she said gently, "I found a place. It's small, but it's mine. I need your help the way you said you would." Evelyn smiled, but it was the kind of smile that faltered before it reached the eyes. She spoke softly, almost too softly. "Soon, Laura, I promise. Just soon." Laura wanted to believe her, but something had changed. Her mother's gaze drifted too often toward the laptop in the living room. She was always waiting for a sound, a message, a ping, that seemed to matter more than the conversation in front of her. That night, Laura lay awake, uneasy. She could not have guessed that the money her mother once promised her had already been wired away, little by little, until the safety net Evelyn had built over a lifetime was nearly gone. Evelyn Ward told herself this was the last time. Just one more transfer, she whispered, and Peter Smith would be here. One more chance, and the silence of her house would finally end. She sent the money for the ticket. Then she waited. She counted the days like a child waiting for Christmas. She pictured him walking through the arrival gate, flowers in hand, smiling at her as though she had been worth the journey all along. But when the day came, the phone buzzed instead. The photo nearly made her drop the screen. Peter, in a hospital bed, bandaged, his eyes shut tight. The message that followed was short. "I was in a car accident. I'll still come. I just need your help. Please don't give up on me." Evelyn's heart ached. The empty chair at her table remained empty. But now the thought of losing him before even meeting him was unbearable. She did what she swore she wouldn't. She opened her account. She wired more. She told herself it was love, or at least the promise of love, and what else was money for if not to bridge the gap between two hearts? Laura noticed the signs first in small ways. Bills on the counter that should have been paid, a hesitation when the topic of money came up. And then one afternoon, while helping her mother with groceries, she saw the bank statement left open on the table. The numbers did not add up. Thousands gone. Withdrawals scattered across weeks. Laura's throat tightened. "Mom," she asked carefully, "what's going on?" Evelyn's hand hovered over the papers. "It's nothing," she said quickly, folding the statement as though that would erase it. But Laura's voice sharpened, fear masking as anger. "Nothing? Mom, this is everything you saved. Where is it going?" Evelyn looked away, her fingers knotting together. Finally, she whispered the name, "Peter. He's young, but he's kind. He's coming to visit Laura. He just needs a little help." Laura's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. "A little help? Mom, you've given him everything. Can't you see what this is?" But Evelyn couldn't, or wouldn't. Her faith in Peter was the only light she clung to, and she would not let her daughter blow it out. The days that followed were a blur of arguments and silences. Laura begged her mother to see the truth, to look past the words on a glowing screen. She showed her articles, stories of scams, warnings printed in bold. But Evelyn shook her head, tears in her eyes. "You don't understand," she whispered. "He cares for me. He listens in ways no one has since your father passed. You may call it a scam. I call it hope." Laura felt something inside her break. Hope. That was the word her mother used for a stranger draining her life savings. Hope for a man who never came, never called, never showed his face in person. The distance between mother and daughter grew heavier than the silence had ever been. Phone calls went unanswered. Dinners ended with slammed doors. Evelyn sat at her laptop, waiting for Peter's words, while Laura sat in her car, wiping tears from her eyes, wondering how to save the woman who refused to be saved. And somewhere, in the quiet space between them, the trust they once shared began to wither. The moment came on a gray morning, the kind of day when the sky seemed undecided between rain and silence. Laura had arrived unannounced, her patience stretched thin. She carried with her a folder, bank records she had pieced together, timelines she had written down, proof that her mother's savings were not simply dwindling but gone. Evelyn Ward sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded neatly, as though preparing for a prayer. Laura laid the papers down. "Mom, look at this. Please. You've given him everything, every last bit." Evelyn's eyes scanned the numbers, but her expression did not change. It was as though she had already made peace with the loss, as though the money had never mattered. "It's not like that," she said softly. "He's real. He's just unlucky. He'll come once he recovers." Laura's chest tightened. "Unlucky? Mom, this man is not coming. He never was. And because of him, you can't help me. You can't even help yourself." The silence that followed was unbearable. For Evelyn, it was a silence filled with stubborn hope. For Laura, it was a silence filled with betrayal. And so, the daughter who had once leaned on her mother's strength, now felt she had no choice but to stand against her. That night, Laura called a lawyer. The lawsuit was not born of anger, but of desperation, to protect what little remained, and to force her mother to see what love had blinded her to. The courtroom was not a place Evelyn ever thought she would sit, at least not as the subject of a case brought by her own child. The benches were hard, the air thick with the echo of other people's sorrows. She clutched her handbag tightly, her knuckles pale. Laura sat across the aisle, her face steady but her eyes heavy with grief. She had not wanted it this way. She had wanted to protect her mother, to recover what could still be recovered. But here they were, on opposite sides, with strangers in black robes deciding what family could not resolve at home. When Evelyn was asked why she had sent the money, her voice trembled, but did not falter. "Because I believed in him," she said. "Because after years of silence, someone saw me. Someone listened." The words rippled through the room. Some shook their heads in pity. Others stared at the floor, as though ashamed of how easily loneliness can be mistaken for love. The judgment that day was not about guilt or innocence, but about consequence. Evelyn would not see her savings restored. Laura would not see her mother persuaded. The court could only confirm what had already been lost, that money, once gone, does not return. But deeper than financial ruin was the shadow it cast across a mother-daughter bond, once strong, now fractured in ways no ruling could mend. When the trial was over, Evelyn returned to her house. It was the same house, with the same walls, the same armchair, the same framed photograph of her late husband on the mantel. But it no longer felt like home. She sat by the window, staring out at the yard where autumn leaves had begun to scatter. Once, she had imagined Peter Smith standing at her gate, suitcase in hand, ready to walk into her life. Now there was only the wind, carrying reminders of what had slipped away. Laura did not visit as often. The lawsuit had left scars on both sides, on the mother who felt betrayed, and on the daughter who felt she had no choice. Their conversations, when they happened, were cautious, careful, each word weighed like glass that might shatter. Evelyn did not speak Peter's name aloud anymore, but in the quiet hours of the night, when the screen of her laptop glowed, she sometimes opened the old messages, reading them as though they were love letters from a life that never truly existed. And so the story ends not with victory, but with silence. A silence that holds both the memory of love and the cost of believing in it too deeply. The lesson lingers, that loneliness can make even the wisest heart vulnerable, that promises can vanish as quickly as they arrive, and that sometimes the deepest loss is not money, but trust. And so, Evelyn Ward was left not with the promise of new love, nor with the comfort of old security, but with silence. A silence that asked more questions than it answered. Was it loneliness that betrayed her, or hope itself? Was it her desire to be seen, to be loved again, that blinded her to the truth? Or was it the simple fact that even the strongest heart can grow fragile when the years grow long and the nights grow quiet? Her story reminds us that sometimes the deepest wounds are not cut by strangers, but by the choices we make when we cannot bear the weight of being alone. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments. What moment in Evelyn Ward's journey moved you the most? And if you were listening closely, you might notice how often Evelyn Ward's name came up. Drop your answer in the comments. We may feature your name in a shout-out as a thank you for being part of our Fiction Echoes family. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this one, the next chapter is already waiting. Just click the video that's about to appear, and we'll see you there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a moment of what happens next.